advocate of racial justice. She worked to expose and dismantle dissent based on discrimination systems globally. I turn it over to Ms. McDougall now.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I want to welcome you all to this launch of Women Belonging to Communities Discriminated Against Based on Work and Descent, Advancing International Rights and Justice. Uh, this is a policy paper of the UN Women, which is hot off the press. I think it went live today or yesterday, and it is critically important. I have some familiarity with problems of communities facing discrimination. As the first UN Special Rapporteur on Minorities, I had the rare opportunity to travel to every continent except Antarctica, to learn about the laws and policies. And so often, it's most importantly, about the societal traditions that rob men, women, and children into our communities of their inherent right to live their best lives and to contribute their talents to their communities and to their nations. I found discrimination in every region of the world. And in those communities, I found some of the most impressive people I have ever met, struggling in spite of the barriers to find ways to educate their children and improve their lives. I also know because I grew up in just such a community. And that was a community that very much like the discussion that we will have today, put barriers not only on people because of their, you know, perceived identity in terms of race or whatever, but also on women. And that came from outside communities and inside communities. So I know a few things about discrimination. And as the vice chair of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, we routinely meet with government officials and representatives of civil societies to try to address the contemporary issues of racism alive in each country and the government obligations that exist to eliminate those violations. Now, the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination recognizes in its Article 1, it recognizes discrimination based on descent. And we have a general recommendation that we then passed years later after the World Conference Against Racism declined to also recognize questions of discrimination based on work and descent. We at CERT decided that we needed to re-emphasize the importance of being mindful of those barriers. So we passed a general recommendation as well. So for all of those reasons, I strongly endorse this UN Women Policy paper. this document and the global campaign being launched with it will fill a number of critical gaps, especially the gap of ignorance that I have seen in my work all over the world. It draws important attention to the international community to the fact that work and descent-based discrimination does not only exist in Southern Asia. It's not just about India, although it's still about India. It exists in many regions and in many countries. And this is not just a matter of historical and ancient practices. It's very contemporary. Discrimination based on work and descent affects an estimated 270 million people globally. That's a lot of talent and inspiration and imagination for us to be wasted. So for all of these reasons, again, I think that we've got to thank G4 for its initiation of this paper. We've got to thank UN Women for taking up the challenge to put it forward. And I've got to thank all of you because I'm about to urge you all to make some very specific commitments on implementation. It's only that in the end really matters. So we have with us to launch this policy paper an incredible number of distinguished voices from all sectors. So many, in fact, that I hope you're going to allow me as moderator to take some shortcuts in order to guarantee that we all will be able to speak today. And starting with, first of all, I am only going to introduce people by the title that they're currently holding, because they're all so distinguished that to read all of their qualifications will take me all day. So I hope you all will agree to that. But anyway, they're full bios in the flyer that's being passed out, so you all can get the full dose of what they've been up to. And secondly, I've got to ask all of the speakers and participants, because we're all going to try to save enough time for all of you to make comments, ask questions, whatever, but you all have to be brief. You've got an incredibly short period of time to make your points. We appreciate that. But nevertheless, we've only got, what, an hour and a half. So now we're going to start with brief opening statements, starting with Shoko Ishikawa, who is Deputy Director of Program Policy and Intergovernmental Division, UN Women.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and advocates, thank you for joining us for this launch of this landmark policy paper on women and girls from communities discriminated on work and descent, who face intersecting discrimination based on gender, descent, and ancestral work. These include Dalit, Roma, Haratin, Kilambola, and Burakamin, and others, communities whose exclusion is systemic, inherited, and too often overlooked in our collective efforts on gender equality and human rights. We are very grateful to the Global Forum of People Discriminated on Work and Descent, especially Paul and his team, for collaborating with our team. We have Maria Elena John here, we have Katisha here, and this partnership that has brought this paper to life. It is the result of many years of organizing, research, and refusal to accept invisibility. Existing international instruments, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, International Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and ILO conventions provide vital foundations. But this paper shows us that we really must go further. The caste-based form of discrimination that women of communities discriminated on work and dissent face is rooted not only in structural inequality, but in centuries-old norms of purity and contamination. Concepts that regulate women's bodies, sexuality, and reproductive autonomy. These are compounded by high levels of violence, forced and unpaid labor, exclusion from education and healthcare, and systemic barriers of land, leadership, and justice. And these are not just fringe experiences. They represent a persistent blind spot in how our global frameworks are applied, interpreted, and resourced. At UN Women, we are very proud to have worked with the community from our earliest days, including supporting Dalit women's storytelling and political leadership in Nepal, partnering with Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian women in Europe to address economic discrimination and harmful practices, and building long-standing collaboration with Afro-descendant communities, including Quilombola women in Brazil. Colleagues, we launched this paper at a time of both opportunity and reckoning as we approach UN 80, Beijing Plus 30, and the 2030 SDG deadline. We are also confronting a global pushback against rights we once assumed were secure, especially for women. If we are serious about leaving no one behind, the women from communities discriminated on work and dissent must not remain at the margins of this promise. They must be central to how we deliver it. And we offer this brief as a resource to all of you to apply, adapt, and build on as we work to close the gaps and bring gender equality closer to those furthest behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving right along, I want to call on Paul Divica, who is convener of G4, but also I have known for many years in this struggle. He's worn a number of hats, but never once was he still, and never once was he silent. So over to you.
Thank you for your kind words. Dear moderator, Professor Gay, Excellencies, dignitaries, and colleagues. Today, as the convener of the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent, I stand in deep solidarity with every woman, every girl who continues to resist the crushing weight of inherited exclusion. This policy paper, supported by UN Women, it's just not a document. It's a recognition, a reckoning, a revolutionary step towards ensuring that the intergenerational pain and resilience of over 270 million people globally, Dalits, Roma, Haratin, Quilombola, Burakumin, and many more, is neither visible nor ignored. For too long, women from these communities have faced the harshest edges of our social hierarchies. Their lives are shaped by patriarchal violence, caste or descent-based exploitation, systemic denial of their basic dignity. They suffer a double, sometimes a triple burden, punished by caste, oppressed by gender, and abandoned many times by the state. I recall way back in 2001, Professor Gay, she had organized a phenomenal public hearing during the World Conference Against Racism, where the entire plenary stood still for 1.5 hours every day while the proceedings were going on. It's a very special space they have given Professor Gay. And one of the instances she chose was that of Sasikala. I think you remember. And Sasikala is the wife of a leader who dared, a Dalit leader who dared to contest for elections. He won the elections, the local elections, and he was warned not to stay, and he has to face dire consequences. And after winning, this person was coming by a public bus, and they caught him and beheaded him. So that wife has made this submission in the World Conference, and as Gay has also just said, despite all this, they have refused to recognize these. So this policy paper does something historic. It names our pain, it maps our discrimination, and it calls urgently and clearly for intersectional justice. It exposes how women, CDWD, remain locked out of education, land rights, ocean rights. This is something which many of us have not recognized. Many in the coastal area, Dalits, are excluded from fishing and from access to ocean life, even though they're protected. Systemic and other forms of purity pollution ideologies, forced labor, and harmful traditions as Devadasi or Trokosi system, as you call it in Africa, in parts of Ghana. And lack of documentation continues to destroy these lives. But it also lifts hope. It confirms and affirms that transformative change is not only possible, but necessary. So GFOD is proud to have supported this process, and thanks to women and all those leaders and activists who have made the evidence possible to make this policy paper. And this is for the first time at the UN level. This brings together the voices of communities across from Niger to Nepal, from Slovakia to Brazil, into a shared framework of accountability. This is feminist, anti-caste, anti-racist roadmap to justice. So this is one clear aspect, as this is just not only a policy paper, but this is about correcting historical wrongs. It's about justice. As Dr. Ambedkar, our icon, has said, when women of different communities rise, entire communities rise. When they lead, we do not just change laws, we change the future. So let this policy paper be a declaration that our time is now. Jai Bhim.
All right, all right. Now, moving to Her Excellency, Ms. Elvina Sousa Calva, Secretary of State for Equality of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste.
Thank you very much. It is an honor for me today on behalf of Timor-Leste to join this very important event. And it's an honor to represent my country here. In Timor-Leste, we carry the legacy of a long and difficult struggle of self-determination. And from that struggle, we build a young democracy guided by principles of equality, dignity, and justice. But we know that true equality goes beyond legal recognition. It requires actively dismantling the many forms of discrimination of women to continue to face in their everyday lives. Our nation and state building guided by principle of equality, dignity, and justice, enriched in our national constitution and international convention, like CEDAW, Beijing Platform for Action, UNCR 1325 on women, peace and security and the SDGs. However, we know that true equality goes beyond legal recognition. And equality requires the actively dismantling of the many forms of discrimination that women still face in their daily lives. In our country, most women from the rural communities, women working in the informal and domestic sectors, and those affected by customary hierarchies face multiple overlapping barriers. And these barriers often push them to the margins of opportunities, including limited access to land and property, economies, healthcare, lower education opportunity, access to justice, and underrepresentation in the leadership and decision-making spaces, particularly at the executive and the municipal and village levels. It is therefore we are committed to strengthening the protection of women's rights through law and ensure its implementation, investing in the education and awareness at all levels to challenge harmful social norms, ensuring that no women or other vulnerable groups of people is left behind in our national development strategies, programs, plans, and budgeting process. We are also creating platforms for grassroots and community-based women leaders to shape the policies that affected their lives through providing financial support and income generating, and also participating actively in municipal and local program activities. And that is why today's event is a powerful reminder that we must act not only on gender, but also gender equality, but also address the intersections where those inequalities intersect and hinder women's active participation in the development across the world. And we must engage women leaders because they build resilience from our struggles and the history of our past, that so that the marginalization and discrimination against women can no longer be tolerated, and women from all walks of life must be involved as agents of change to eliminate all forms of discrimination across all sectors of society. And on behalf of Timor-Leste, I reaffirm our solidarity and commitment to working with all partners, especially those of you are here today, ZFOD, UN Women, and also other partners, UN agencies, civil society, and fellow member states to advance intersectional justice. Obrigada, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have a video message from the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Ashwini KP.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, civil society organizations, activists, and dear comrades, I'm extremely honored to speak at this event, which is timely and significant. I extend my deepest appreciation to UN Women and GFORD for initiating a policy paper on the situation of women and girls from communities discriminated based on work and descent. I take this opportunity to highlight the importance of acknowledging the experiences of women and girls belonging to communities discriminated based on work and descent. Mainstream feminist movements have historically universalized women's issues without addressing race, ethnicity, descent, caste, religion as a central axis of oppression. And this has led to the exclusion of experiences of marginalized voices from feminist spaces. The discourse of intersectionality has gained prominence as a counter narrative to the existing mainstream feminism in both activism and academia. Intersectionality is not merely a theoretical concept, it is a lived reality of millions of individuals who experience discrimination at multiple levels. Women from Dalit, Roma, Kilimbola, Barakumin, Osu, Como, Haratan, Bela, Shwasin, and many other similar communities continues to face hierarchical structures of oppression, further subjecting them to multiple forms of discrimination and exclusion. This has exacerbated the socio-economic, educational, and political status, further deteriorating their overall empowerment. This policy document presents an evidence based analysis of discrimination linked to work and dissent, highlighting the impact on women and girls. In the context of discrimination based on work and dissent or caste, intersectionality holds significant place. Therefore, it is important to ensure intersectional approach in policymaking which includes dissent and work, including caste as an element of discrimination. The failure to account for intersecting identities results in the erasure of the most vulnerable groups from the dominant narratives of justice. I urge member states to ensure mapping of disaggregated data based on dissent, caste, and work, and combine quantitative findings with qualitative accounts to ensure policies are grounded in real life experiences. States must focus on implementing inclusive policies and legislations. Women from communities discriminated based on work and dissent should be meaningfully involved in all stages of policy making, supported by strong anti discrimination laws, national action plans, and community led initiatives. There needs to be a stress on inclusive participation, especially at grassroots level, which is vital to ensure accountability, at the same time address systemic exclusion and promote social and gender justice. I would like to express my concern about the absence of caste as a form of discrimination in the international human rights framework. The omission has prompted many experts and human rights activists to frame caste based discrimination within the context of dissent. Therefore, I see this policy document as a part of several ongoing efforts that emphasize the need to explicitly include caste based discrimination within the scope of International Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. I urge member states and international bodies to recognize caste based discrimination by formally including caste in the international human rights framework like ICERT. Lastly, intersectionality must be legally recognized and reflected in comprehensive anti-discrimination framework in international human rights law as well as national policies by member states. Legal definitions should reflect lived experiences and enforcement mechanisms must account for the compound and layered harms experienced by individuals discriminated based on work and dissent, including caste. Thank you for your kind attention.
So that is our opening panel. And I think that, these statements have set the perfect tone for the discussion that we're going to have for the rest of our time today, drawing our attention to first, the importance of always using an intersectional lens in human rights work. Secondly, the critical role of governmental leadership in these efforts. Then the UN as a critical player, the civil society as an engine for change in human rights work and in this area particularly. And, with emphasis on the voices of grassroots, not just in general, but as leaders in the efforts we will undertake. We face, as was mentioned, a global pushback on rights. We're not riding a wave anymore. We're up against a tsunami. And we have to build our strategies with that in mind. We must go beyond legal recognition, although legal recognition is an important initial step. But we've got to go to all the other steps. And hopefully today we're going to talk about many of those other steps that must be added. In addition to the point that, we have to realize that it's not enough even for government recognition of equality. You got to dismantle the structural barriers, and that's hard work over long periods of time. And finally, let me just say, um, we must follow women leaders, and women must lead, and we must be ready to follow. So now we will get an overview of what the policy paper actually says. And so I turn to our two presenters on that. And first is Mary Elena John, who is Senior Racial Justice Lead at UN Women. And secondly, Simona Tarakoy, had a hard time with that, Senior Researcher at G4. Over to both of you.
Thank you, Gay. Is it on? Yeah? Yes, thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, all other protocols observed. I can't begin without saying this. About 25 years ago, I worked under Gay. Gay was the executive director of that, at the time, International Human Rights Law Group. And while we were discussing this, this event, we got on to other topics in the last day or two. And Gay asked me my opinion of something that she had an opinion on in this UN world of human rights. And I said, but Gay, everything I know about human rights, I learned from you. You trained me. So how am I going to give you anything different from your perspective, since this is the angle I come from? And it is the true north. And in the last almost 30 years, Gay, I have drawn heavily on it. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. Yes. And thank you for saying yes to be here today. So yes, we are launching this policy paper. I want to emphasize that it is a first. Paul did that already, Shoko did that, we all did that, but it is groundbreaking. It is a first. I know there would have been papers on CDWD in general, but not on CDWD women. And so this has to be stated, and we thank those who made it happen. There are some in the room who might not want to or be able to acknowledge their role. It doesn't happen without funding. I will say that, and so I acknowledge the silent funder in the room. I would also say that this policy paper is representing something bigger than a document. It is actually it may be not new model, but a growing and more important model of international cooperation. While the high-level multilateral channels are stalling, these, on the surface, disparate communities are building their own formidable connections across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. From a Roma woman in Eastern Europe to an Osu woman in West Africa, they are focusing on what unites them, sharing strategies, documenting realities, and demanding that legal frameworks fully protects them. This is worth repeating. They are demanding this. And in this space, when we're talking about the international legal protections, we are talking about the UN and the kind of work that Gay has been doing all of her life, and many people in here have been doing. And this is where we are going with it. The genesis of this work, I do want to mention, at UN Women, we sometimes mark time from one CSW to the other. So I can remember that this was exactly 2 CSWs ago when I sat with a group of CDWD women in a small meeting room in UN Women for the first time. And I asked them, what would a racial justice lens look like if UN Women were to truly apply one to your communities? Well, they had a lot to say, and they did not hold back. It was Chatham House rules, so I can't say everything, but I can say that the conversation exposed a fundamental gap that they prioritized as key to this moment, and that is how we are here at this moment. CDWD discrimination affects every aspect of life. I was going to touch on it, but everyone has already done it, so I don't need to go there, except to say that for women, it is particularly so. It has been mentioned severally as to the generational concepts of purity and pollution and what that means for women and women's bodies. And I will just say it's past social exclusion, it is codified, and it is embodied generational violence. And yes, there are some international protections, but none fully address the very complex intersectional nature of CDWD discrimination, especially in gendered forms. The fragmented nature of these protections leaves critical gaps in addressing that discrimination. And that's why they are not just asking for inclusion, they are demanding stronger, more coherent international legal recognition. This policy paper lays the groundwork of identifying where current frameworks fall short and offers concrete recommendations for closing those gaps. Colleagues, we are living through growing backlash against gender equality, racial justice, and also against this UN system of international cooperation. That is why what we have begun to call grassroots multilateralism is so important. CDWD communities are leading their own multilateral movement. And through this policy paper, they have provided a roadmap for institutions to belong. The evidence is here, the leadership is here. What's needed now is a global institutional response that matches their ambition. UN Women is proud to support this bold movement. And I now turn to my colleague, Simona Tarotkoy, to talk about the paper's recommendations and findings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Elena. Thank you, Madam Moderator. It is indeed a real pleasure for me as a Roma academic activist to be part of this, of the drafting of this paper, to say so. But before, I want to acknowledge Rita Isaac, who was the lead researcher, but also the members of our communities who have contributed and provided feedback throughout the drafting process. So as you have seen already, I hope on your desk, you already have a copy of the paper, and also the online community can maybe see it in the chat. The paper, it's unique, as some of you have already acknowledged in your statements. And indeed, it's a unique document, specifically on CDWD women. But I think that what makes it unique is the combination of UN references, recommendations to CDWD women, as well as bringing together the experiences of women from the ground and the lived experiences of these women. So as it's mentioned already in the paper, so I don't want to take a lot of time, but as you have maybe, or you will have the opportunity to see in the paper, there are a lot of recommendations, observations, targeting our women in the human rights treaties and frameworks. And the brief makes a specific point that there are about 500 recommendation observations from 160 documents among 13 human rights mechanisms only about Roma women. So altogether, imagine how many recommendations, observations are on all the women that have been mentioned before from Communities Discriminated and Working Descent. So the paper brings together, first and foremost, a very good understanding of the legal framework, what is the concept of discrimination based on work and descent, and also who are these communities, where we can find them. As has been mentioned, this is a global phenomenon, but there's a shared struggle, a shared identity of or experience of discrimination. And then the focus on gender, like how are women from these communities experiencing this form of discrimination differently compared to the mainstream, let's say. And what I think it's very important and very nicely drafted, put in this paper is the main areas of concern. What are the specific challenges that we as women from these communities experience? And I just want to mention some. Maria Elena already mentioned purity, pollution, untouchability, but also the component of forced labor or labor restrictions in general, because this form of discrimination is pushing our women to do the most menial jobs that other members of the community would not do. So we are pushed into forced labor, global supply chains. We do a lot of domestic work, unpaid domestic work, socially degrading, dirty, and hazardous jobs. So that's one of the key components, to say so, of this concept of discrimination based on work and descent. Of course, the paper is also touching upon, the larger patriarchal norms and gender roles, and how these norms define certain authorities in the household, in the community, and how the voices of our women are affected. Then there's a lot of, there are several areas of concern related to education, to housing and living conditions, lack of identity documents, and of course, the key issue of multidimensional poverty, which, it's heavily impacted, our women are heavily impacted. What's also, I think, very specific is the harmful traditional practices. And I think here there were several examples throughout the paper, the Trotsky system in Africa, involving the enslavement of women and girls as a form of atonement to the gods, the Devdashi system, and several others. And I think these are very specific harmful practices to our communities. Of course, two important areas, the lack of participation of women from our communities in decision-making structures. And, this is not the general participation of women, but imagine how many layers of, making sure you have access to education, you have the capacity to participate, the layers of discrimination we encounter. So that's, I think it's quite important. And lastly, the access to justice part. Justice for our communities, it's an important issue. There's a low rate of reporting cases of discrimination. Many countries, member states, don't recognize this form of discrimination. And of course, there are ongoing human rights violation that many times the perpetrators who are committing these crimes are not properly addressed. The paper is also putting together a set of good practices, and we are quite aware that this is not the norm, but I would say rather isolated examples. And I think these practices are serving, as inspiration maybe to member states, to also regional authorities, because we also have a regional good practice on what can be done, or look around at least and see what can be done. And lastly, the set of recommendations that we have put together, and I very much like to thank the special rapporteur for her comments and for specific recommendations as well. I think the paper addresses quite nicely, what the UN system can do, what the member states can do. I'm not going to read them all, but I would let you, just go through and explore. Thank you very much, and I hand it over to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much. And we're going to have an opportunity for members of the room to raise questions if they're any and make comments. But first, I want to move on to the panel because we've got a panel of experts to comment first. But I think that we've gotten a very good framework from the two of you on what is in the policy paper. And now we want to, based on that and based on all that we've had people say so far, we want to move from policy to practice and implementation in this part of the section of speakers. And so we've got some diverse voices that will help us think about those issues. So first of all, I want to call on our panelists, Anna Brabkova, who is Director of Labor Market Integration in the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs of the Czech Republic. And, you know, a very interesting background to talk to us about these issues. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, I could speak hours, but I will try to be brief, as many of you, I guess. And I will try to pronounce or introduce the view from the member state, let's say, from the level of Czechia. Of course, it is a great honor to be here. And I would say that this policy paper is really highly relevant for Czech Republic because we still face huge discrimination of Roma people and especially Roma women. There are about 250,000 of Roma people in Czech Republic, which is about 2.5% of all inhabitants. And nearly half of them, according to EU Fundamental Rights Agency, experience discrimination based on their ethnicity. We might say it is probably more. However, I would like to stress that, and you already said this, and I would sign it, definitely, that one thing is the legislation, and other thing is the public, the relationship in everyday life, and the access to justice, access to school, access to education in general. And I would say on the first level, this legislation and strategy level, Czech Republic made a huge step, and we have all necessary legislation, I would say, anti-discriminatory, etc., to fight against the discrimination of women and Roma as in general. However, the second level of the, I called it kind of instrument level or policy level, resources as well. There, I would say we are so-so. We have a lot to catch. If I have time, I will explain two main instruments we've been dealing with now at the ministry. But what I would like to stress is this more like basic level, the third level, the everyday life. And I think we are not there yet at all to respect what is in legislation and strategies, etc. Because women, Roma women in general, actually, but Roma women especially face multi-discrimination as Roma, as women, as mothers very often, to join good jobs, decent jobs, to have all the possibilities to be well educated and to join everyday life with all the respect from the society. I would say the most important barriers are in education. So if from the very beginning, Roma women are have less access to higher education, then there is a problem with housing. It's very important that we make accessible decent housing for all, because segregation in area, it's actually one of the biggest problems. Then healthcare, of course, and what I am a specialist of is employment. And as it was said here already, and thank you Ray for that, in Czech Republic, the problem is discrimination at the very entrance level of job, of course. Employers have a lot of prejudice against women as such, but also and especially against Roma women. What we've been trying to do now, we have new legislation. It's called integration social economy, or try to give more resources to companies which are responsible in a social economic way, to be on one part responsible for the social justice as well, but on the other hand, it's a real business. They make normal products. They work for some chains, for example, for state, and through some level of legislative, let's say, discounts on social or healthcare, or taxes, we try to make these businesses have better conditions to be inclusive and to be held also by, for example, Roma women. And it works. We also have integration, let's say, workplace, where we put together social work on one hand, and subsidies for salary for people who are really excluded from society. They face very often multiple problems, such huge in debt, which forces them very often out of the legal market, as it was mentioned here. So it's not only job, but there is also around this whole social work. So I think this it's being observed actually by European Commission. We hope that it will be a way how to really help the society. And what I wanted to stress, it's the recommendations from the policy paper I read yesterday, actually. And there are 2 points I would like to stress. For Czech Republic, it's crucial to have good collection and analysis of this aggregated data. That's what we've been dealing with. For those who made this policy paper must know that this is quite problematic still, because the real evidence-based policy will really make us having the way forward, definitely. And the second, it's, but I must stress, meaningful participation in the planning of those who's been after the object of the policy. And I would say it's not only planning, but also we need more Roma women in policymaking level. In politics, we have almost none. But also in culture, in media, and we have to build let's say, the normality, of appearance of Roma women and empowerment of Roma women in Czechia. So I think this is the huge step to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those were some really crucial points, especially those last two. I hope everybody keeps them in mind for our general discussion. We're going to follow now with a video message from Nicolas Levrat, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on Minorities, the current one, since November 2023.
Dear colleagues and friends, it is an honor to address you today for the launch of the UN Women Landmark Policy Paper on women belonging to communities discriminated based on work and descent. As Special Rapporteur on minority issues, I want to extend my sincere appreciation to UN Women for shining a light on this often overlooked intersection of gender, caste, descent-based discrimination, and systemic exclusion. This publication marks a significant step forward in advancing justice for some of the most marginalized women in the world. Discrimination based on work and descent is often a minority rights issue. Across continents, from the Dalits in South Asia, the Burakumin in Japan, Roma communities across Europe, the Quilombola in Brazil, Haratin in Mauritania, to the Ozu in Nigeria, communities face chronic generational exclusions. They are defined not only by their identity and heritage, but also by the systemic barriers that continues to deny them equal access to rights, opportunities, and most important, dignity. In such setting, entire communities are marginalized. But for women, the injustice is doubled. They face discrimination both as members of marginalized community and as women. They are subject to patriarchal traditions within their own groups and to structural racism and exclusion from the broader society. This double invisibility as minorities and as women remain an urgent and under-addressed human rights challenge. In modern history, no society has spontaneously granted women equal rights. Every gain in women's rights has come through political struggle and societal transformation. Yet, for women belonging to communities discriminated based on work and descent, this progress of their rights as women has too often been obstructed by the rigid hierarchies that sustain descent-based exclusion. This policy paper rightly calls attention to this layered injustice. It set out the international legal framework, including the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, which together provide a robust basis for action. It also documents how women in these communities, often referred to as CDWD, are excluded from education, healthcare, justice, and political participation. It thus highlights how their voices are too often sidelined, not only in women's rights frameworks, but also within minority rights agenda. Addressing this reality demands a deliberate, intersectional, and context-sensitive approach. It requires dismantling the structural system that uphold descent-based exclusion while also working within affected community to support transformation with and by women themselves. As Special Rapporteur on minority issues, I am committed to ensuring that the rights, needs, and voices of women from CDWD communities are placed firmly on the international human rights agenda. We should ensure that no tradition, no hierarchy, and no social order can justify the denial of equality and human dignity. Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Now we have a comment from Claudia Flores, who is on the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, sitting in the WEOG seat.
Yes, ma'am, luckily.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Gay. And it's really an honor to sit next to you. I think everybody here probably feels that. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I'm honored to join you today in my capacity as Vice Chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. As always, I'm deeply humbled by the presence of high-level state representatives, UN colleagues, and really here, and I think this has been noted, most importantly, civil society and affected communities who I think are really necessarily taking a leadership role on this particular issue, maybe more broadly on human rights issues as we enter complicated times. First, please allow me to reflect on how important this work is and to really congratulate UN Women and the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that this report has broken ground in addressing the issues of discrimination for women within these communities, and in doing so through methodologies that forefront the lived experiences of women and girls. This particular issue, I think, has been difficult to get at for some reason, and so it really is quite important that this report has been published. The working group premises its own work on the full recognition of the diversity of women and girls, which can be quite complex at times, including, of course, from communities discriminated on work and dissent. Women and girls, as we all know, are not monolithic. They have some shared experiences, some overlapping experiences, and some historically consistent experiences across the world, but they are not a monolithic group. And their experiences and lived realities are shaped heavily by social and political structures around them, and of course, heavily influenced by race, class, sexual orientation, ability, disability, indigeneity, and other aspects of identity and condition, including, of course, what we're here to talk about today, work and dissent. Yet at a global level, we do see how the buzzword of intersectionality, despite the fact that it has become a buzzword, does not always translate into holistic inclusion and consideration. The current policy brief represents one area where our efforts have now been made more responsive, dynamic, and meaningful bit by bit. The policy paper addresses gaps in our understanding of the concept and legal framework of discrimination on the basis of work and dissent, and how this intersects with the concept of gender discrimination more broadly. The main concerns, which are articulated very clearly, highlight unique issues faced by women in these communities, including stigma and notions of purity, unique challenges in cultural recognition and inclusion, harmful traditional practices, and access to justice. I think it was Simona who mentioned the layers of discrimination, which is a very important way to think about this and is always difficult to get your head around from a legal perspective. They also demonstrate, the report, the ways in which the struggles across communities, identities, and intersecting forms of discrimination can bring about new coalitions that address the issues that affect us all, even if differentially, which is a sign of hope. These include issues identified in the report, such as patriarchal norms and gender roles, multidimensional poverty, education, and more. In my view, one of the most important accomplishments of the policy paper is the way in which it brings together the existing work of international human rights and treaty body mechanisms on this topic as well. To ensure mainstreaming of these issues, we all need to be more aware of the baseline, the progress of work across mechanisms, the need to commit to continued close coordination, including through the recognition of CDWD women, how they are impacted across rights issues and mandates that are all sort of working in pieces but trying to work together. The second sort of part of what I want to share is that what meaningful recognition of CDWD women looks like within the UN and international mechanisms. And here I'd like to highlight one of the findings of the policy paper, which I think will illustrate my perspective on this. The policy paper helpfully documents the extent of engagement on the case of Roma communities, for example. It states that from 2017 to the present, UN special procedures have made 242 recommendations or observations through 33 official documents engaging 17 different thematic mechanisms. And while I agree with the findings of the study that such broad thematic engagement indicates both relevance and progress made on inclusion, it is also existing along a concerning trend of non-implementation. And I think that's what we all need to recognize. So I'd just like to add this additional perspective because as we go forward and celebrate the report, we also need to be thinking about what are the next steps and what we can expect from what the future will look like. So in the case of implementation, I want to say that it's not just implementation of any particular recommendation, but there's generally been a hesitancy to implement recommendations to address the broad systemic and structural inequalities and systems of power that drive intersecting forms of discrimination. And I say that statement very broadly, but it's particularly impactful here. And then, of course, here we look to the lovely states that are here to take up the broad banner of issues and to take them up holistically with the support of this movement that is becoming quite effective, with long-term transformation in mind, and of course to hold one another accountable in all the forums, not just human rights context, because this is how the UN works. And so as highlighted in the policy paper, there are already many important tools available to states to begin to establish more robust responses and to do just that, particularly for CDWD women and girls. CEDAW's general recommendations, such as GR 39 on discrimination against women in the context of the COVID pandemic, GR 31 on harmful practices, GR 28 on the core obligations of state parties to articulate clearly the legal obligations of states to address intersecting and compounded forms of discrimination. And if applied to the cases of CDWD women and girls, could be enormously powerful tools. So on behalf of the working group, we of course will continue our commitment to improve and advance engagement with women in all of their diversity and deepen our engagement specifically with CDWD women and with states on related obligations. So please count on us as very engaged partners in ensuring that this report is impactful. We recognize and commit to leverage our global mandate to actively promote the inclusion and meaningful engagement of CDWD women in all of our work, as well as to not only, as the report eloquently states, de-escalate discrimination, but continue to illuminate its harmful effects within the broader institutional, legal, and policy frameworks. Thank you so much.
I mean, I just have to say that these are some really phenomenal inputs that we're getting. And I would like to spend an hour talking in conversation with just each one of the speakers here about what you have put forward. Of course, we could talk for a day and a half about the UN mechanisms, what they are and are not. And as well, I'd really love to dig deep into the question of employment and women in these circumstances and how you move that forward. In a sense, employment is behind so many other things having to get done in the society before employment, meaningful employment is possible. And so that's worth a half-day discussion in and of itself. And I know I've had a half-day with many people in your positions, not as committed, though, as you are to the right outcome. But we've got to move along. We've got to leave this room at 4. Let me now turn quickly to Alima Tal, who is senior rights expert with the GFOP and is based in Gambia, but works on these issues across Africa. We met in Geneva, so over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's a pleasure to meet you once again. Yeah, and Excellencies, distinguished delegates. My name is Alima, and I come from the Gambia, a small country with big ambition. We strive for decent work, equal access to opportunities, and social inclusion for all. While we continue to face many challenges, we have also made real progress. The Gambia is a proud host of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Just recently, the Commission adopted a groundbreaking resolution calling for the protection of the rights of communities discriminated against work and dissent. This makes Africa the first continent where government or human rights actors collectively taking this issue seriously. At a national level, the National Human Rights Commission of the Gambia released a pioneering report for the first time officially recognized caste and descent-based discrimination in the country, the Gambia. The report explicitly condemns social exclusion of so-called slaves by so-called nobles as an illegal and unlawful under both Gambian law and international treaties ratified by the Gambia. So this is a historical step forward. The Gambia National Human Rights Commission investigated numerous complaints, including police brutality, systematic caste-based abuse, highlighting the everyday violations faced by these communities, the CDWD communities. So the key findings of the National Human Rights reports include harassment, assault, and public humiliations of individuals in the CDWD communities, physical attack, social punishment, and fines. So the fines include violation of constitutional and international rights, despite the Gambian constitution protection under Article 28 and 33. Caste is not explicitly listed as a prohibited ground for discrimination. Also among the findings, a widespread of exclusion. Discrimination affects access to education, employment, justice, especially for women and children who face compounded vulnerabilities. The Gambia National Human Rights Commission rightly noted that existing laws, including Domestic Violence Act, the Women Act, and the Sexual Offense Act, lack explicit protection for people facing caste-based discrimination. These legal gaps must be urgently addressed. But recognition alone is not enough. We must act. We are already seeing interest from neighboring countries. The challenge now is to build momentum across regions, sharing good practices, providing technical support, and holding states accountable through regional mechanisms like the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Institutional recognition is not the end, it is the beginning of inclusion. For communities that have faced generation of exclusion, this is a turning point, a chance to turn acknowledgement into action and stigma into justice. And so, in closing, we call for equal inclusive representation of women from descent-based communities in all decision-making bodies, in line with CEDAW General Recommendation 40. A national survey to fully understand the specific impact of caste-based discrimination on women and girls, and an explicit legal prohibition against caste and descent-based discrimination in the Domestic Violence Act 2013, and the Sexual Offense Act 2013, and the Women's Act 2010. Africa is leading. I am proud as a young African woman to stand here and say the generation is not silenced. We are not waiting for someone to rescue us. We are building justice step by step, law by law, voice by voice. So thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of voice by voice, I now want to turn to Queen Bisson, who is also with GFOP, who will speak, but she will also present a video compilation of voices of women facing this kind of discrimination. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair. There is a saying that goes thus: say the truth, and the truth will set you free. And the bitter truth here today is that despite the commendable domestic legal provisions, women from decent communities continue to face multiple forms of discrimination, including exclusion through customary provisions of caste institutions on the basis of the notion of purity and pollution, as it's already mentioned, patriarchal attitudes, and gender discrimination. As a result of such exclusion and discrimination, they endure extreme forms of poverty, humiliation, and the denial of social and economic rights. Their vulnerable economic status, combined with the patriarchal values, exposes them to various forms of violations. Some are already mentioned. I will just mention a few: forced marriages, early marriage, child marriage, suicide, traditional harmful practices, persecution, and killing. offering girls for domestic work to families of landlords, bonded labor, the widespread practice of prostitution and trafficking of women and girls continue to present a considerable challenge in the communities. At this level, I think civil society, CSOs, NGOs, community leaders have an important organization should design and implement targeted interventions that addresses the specific needs and challenges faced by women from decent communities. This includes providing education, economic empowerment, legal aid, and community mobilization initiatives tailored to the context of these communities. Communities leaders and organizations on the part have a crucial role in challenging the discriminatory practices, promoting social cohesion, and advocating for the rights of women within their communities. They can facilitate dialogue, raise awareness, and mobilize collective actions to address the structural barriers that perpetuate poverty and exclusion. Before getting to hear the voices from the community, I want to reiterate some few recommendations which are already in the policy paper. The need to expedite the adoption of the national strategies and action plan on gender empowerment and ending gender-based violence, and allocate education resources for its implementation. You can see the CDO NPL, Power 21. Ensuring that it is implemented in line with the general recommendation of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, number 19 and 35, and adopt a specific national action plan on violence against women that includes appropriate temporary special measures to accelerate their full participation in decision-making. And last but not the least, advocate before government to enact and enforce policies that promote the rights and inclusion of women from decent communities. This includes implementing affirmative actions measures, enforcing anti-discriminatory laws, and investing in social protection programs targeting women from these decent communities. And now invite Pranjali Online to share about the voices from the communities. Thank you.
Nous, les femmes, nous avons le droit d'être entendues. Pas seulement dans nos foyers, mais surtout dans les décisions qui concernent nos vies, nos communautés, nos pays et même dans le monde. Trop souvent, on nous met de côté. On nous écoute poliment, mais on ne nous entend pas. Pourtant, nous avons de la sagesse, nous avons de l'expérience et nous avons une vraie envie de changement.
In Nepal, Dalit women make up 52% of the total Dalit population. But every day we face violence, discrimination and exclusion simply because of our caste and our gender. In the last few months, several Dalit women have died under suspicious circumstances in the Tarai. Their deaths are not properly investigated and their families are left without answer. This fear and silence must stop. According to Nepal police, over 11% of the women who face violence are Dalit women and 19% are Dalit girls. Dalit women are the most frequent victims of violence, but our pain is ignored.
Roma women, as other communities discriminated based on work and descent, are still struggling with basic issues such as lack of access to water, electricity, proper roads, healthy environments, or services of reproductive justice, or for victims of harmful practices. We need to make these experiences visible. We need to address them in policies, and we need to reinforce institutional practices.
मी स्वच्छतामध्ये कामाला होते, मातृकड सोसायटीमध्ये कामाला होते मी. मला गाडी ढकलून पोट दुखलं माझं. पोट दुखल्याच्या नंतर मला तर चालू झाला, माझ्या अंगावरचं चाललं. 2 वर्ष अंगावरचं गेलं माझं. मी परत दवाखान्यामध्ये ॲडमिट झाले. माझी पिशवी काढण्यात आली. मला लय कर्ज झालं म्हणून माझं घर विकलं. त्या लोकांना कळवलं तरी त्या लोकांनी माझं मनावर घेतलं नाही. शेवटी घरी कायला आलं मग माझा मुलगा घर करून वारला माझा मुलगा माझ्या खूप कर्ज झालं तरी या लोकांनी माझं काही मनावर घेतलंच नाही या लोकांनी स्वच्छतावाल्यांनी तर माझी हीच विनंती आहे की जे माझ्या संगत झालं ते पुढच्या महिला संगत नको व्हायला.
Também sou a primeira mulher negra quilombola a graduar e fazer mestrado em Direito no Brasil em uma universidade pública. Nós quilombolas somos descendentes de africanos que lutaram contra a escravização e formaram as comunidades livres, né? Nossa história, nossa resistência, nossa identidade, resiliência. Para nós no Brasil, somos o centro da vida. Nossos centros da vida são chamados de quilombos, né? Esses quilombos não é apenas lugar físico, é identidade, é dignidade, é território, é o nosso lar. A Constituição brasileira reconhece nossos direitos, mas os processos de efetivação dos direitos ainda são muito lentos, né? Nossas comunidades, em sua maioria agrícola, rural, liderada por mulheres, né? Ainda estão lutando, né, por acesso a algumas políticas básicas de acesso à terra, saneamento, água, educação.
Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent, Nyabo, Ndiosu, Ndiobu, Ndiume, Nampara, Eastern Nigeria, Kabamba Funa Koseria, Okachasi Omumani, Bupani Deju, Omumani, Bupani Dejiaga. Si meditezi no Omumani, si asizino na mani duosu na diala manme, si asizino na mani bonosu, no man down, no fees in government. Somos
cultural, geograficamente, historicamente únicos, mas não estamos sozinhos. E o resumo da política de hoje reconhece isso. Ela traz à tona essas experiências, esse compartilhamento de comunidade, de todo mundo que foram marginalizados, desterritorializados e desumanizados por grupos dominantes que criaram a falsa hierarquia, né, de terra, de pureza, de trabalho, de valor. Mas esse momento não deve ser o fim, né? Ele deve ser o início de um conhecimento global, né, de um reconhecimento global mais profundo, especialmente para as nossas irmãs de África, que muitas vezes são invisibilizados na política, ignorados nas estatísticas, como os nossos amigos entre os Romas na Europa, para os nossos Dalits, né, para os Dalits, os Buraquins na Ásia e muitos outros que vivem sobre o sistema semelhante de exclusão.
Addressing these issues will ensure us that if women from these communities and groups have access, then everyone has access.
That was really incredible. Thank you very much. So now we have 10 minutes left in this room. But I do want to see if anybody else in the room has a very quick question or point to make. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. As the youth advisor and delegate from Pakistan, a country rich in culture, societal norms, and of course, traditions, I would like to briefly make a point that we've been hearing this buzzword empowerment since forever, and we grew up hearing that. But I would really like to reflect on this point that what do we mean by empowerment? Empowerment actually begins when we stop talking about them and we start listening to them. So seeing all these initiatives being done by all of you, Your Excellencies, about how we're listening to these stories and giving them a voice is actually very encouraging, because if I talk on behalf of Pakistan, this is something we face on an everyday basis. Especially, I would like to emphasize on leadership. There are very few women when we see in boardrooms, and we're still trying to, bridge the gender gap in that. So in that, I would like to just conclude my statement that there's a very thin line between exploitation and exposure. So when we talk about giving women the voice, giving them the recognition, we also have to ensure, is it going towards exploitation or exposure? And I would like to conclude my point on this thing, that we should come up with what do we mean by empowerment? And this is a question I would leave to for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw another hand. Is it the same point? Different? Yes.
Good afternoon, Excellencies. Thank you very much. As the representative of the Permanent Mission of Colombia, it is my honor to extend our sincere congratulations on the launch of this important policy paper. And we would like to thank you for the recognition of Colombia's efforts as a positive example. San Basilio de Palenque has a profound historical and cultural significance in Colombia. Founded by formerly enslaved Africans who escaped colonial rule, Palenque is considered the first free Black town in the Americas. Its legacy of resistance and cultural preservation has been recognized by the Colombian Constitution and also internationally. In 2005, UNESCO declared San Basilio de Palenque a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. I would like to highlight a historic milestone for Colombia, the election of Francia Márquez Mina as the first Afro-Colombian women vice president. Her leadership has been transformative. She has championed differentiated public policies for Afro-descendant peoples with a focus on environmental justice, territorial rights, and the empowerment of Afro-Colombian women and girls. At a multilateral level, under her leadership, Colombia is currently promoting the comprehensive recognition of Afro-descendant peoples within the United Nations bodies, as well as regional mechanisms. In this regard, we recommend avoiding the association of Afro-descendant individuals or peoples with concepts such as minorities or vulnerable communities that keep them from accessing the prerogatives that the law recognizes to peoples entitled to self-determination. While Colombia may not fully share the framing of communities, we continue to actively support initiatives aimed at combating racism and racial discrimination, and those that promote the respect, protection, and fulfillment of the human rights of Afro-descendant peoples. In fact, we would like to recall the official recognition of July 25th as the International Day of Afro-Descendant Women and Girls at the United Nations, an effort led by Vice President Marquez. This date is a powerful opportunity to elevate the voices, struggles, and contributions of Afro-descendant women and girls globally. And the first anniversary of this recognition will be commemorated in Cali at a high-level event led by the Vice President with the support of the UN Women. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I see a hand here, gentlemen. Yes, here.
Thank you, Chair. So happy to see you, and congratulations to GFOD and UN Women on the policy paper. My name is Bakri Tanja. So what I would like to say is GFOD should be a big tent. So to try to incorporate as many people as possible, particularly women who are affected. So to make my point, the case, for instance, in Mauritania, we have my sister here. Her husband is among the more than 500 Black officers who are killed because they are Black in Mauritania. They have been fighting as widows for over 35 years, and still justice has not been served. They really need, support. So I could talk more about it, but the time, I have to respect your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And it's very important that Mauritania be raised in the context of this discussion. So thank you very much. I am under an obligation to close this at 4 o'clock. I don't know if you have something to say that would only be a sentence But if it's longer than a sentence, we can't get it in before 4 o'clock. So, what? How much is a little more time? What? 10 minutes more? Okay, I'll take this woman here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and congratulations to everyone, especially the drafting team and UN Women and the Global Forum. I'm Gabriela Hrabanova. I'm from the European Roma Grassroots Organization Center, Network. And since we launched this policy paper, we need to ensure that this will be a living document. And I think that this is driving the actions across the UN system. We saw that civil society took very important role in being behind this document. But what is needed for civil society to institutionalize the rights of women and girls from the CDWD communities? How we can ensure our full inclusion in policymaking and programming and monitoring. And I really believe that we need some more concrete steps from the UN agencies, especially or particularly from the UN Women regional offices to support our CDWD women and girls. And it doesn't need to be through the funding, but promoting the leadership and ensuring our voices that would shape the national gender equality strategies. And this paper sets powerful foundation, but we need to make the meaningful change. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a crucial point. That's a crucial point. Did I see a hand over here in the second row? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Greg Walker. I was an invited speaker right next door in room C, and we were talking about sustainability, and what they skipped, what they did not spend enough time talking about was women. I had a problem with that. And then I come back out and I see you guys over here doing just that. I'm an inventor. I've invented a bioregenerative device that takes the place of pit latrines and toilets. You put it in your house and it makes money for you. According to me and my team, one of my team members is a NASA scientist. His job was to find out how to bioregenerate materials that come out of the human body so you can go to space. So what he looked at, when he looked at my device, he said, I created a device that can actually create bioregenerative actual value for people, and women have more bioregenerative value than men do. So if people use my device, they'll actually want women, they'll actually celebrate women being born as opposed to being horrible.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And interesting point. But let's stick to the topic here. Any other points? Yes.
Hello, bonjour, Tansi. My name is Divya Sharma, and I'm here on behalf of the official delegation of Canada, as well as here representing civil society on behalf of Manitoba Council for International Cooperation on the Commission of the Status of Women. So I'm thankful to be here. And I know for the high-level political forum, there's a very high emphasis on the review of SDG 5, the advancement of women, girls, and during these dire times of global conflict, we oftentimes see women and their advancement towards equality being pushed down during times of conflict. And that's a huge issue. So my question to any of the panelists today is, how do we make sure that women's bodies aren't capitalized during regular day-to-day, but also during times of conflict? How do we make sure that women's agendas aren't pushed to the side? Because these are critical issues that need to be addressed. And I want to thank UN Women for launching such a comprehensive strategy today. Thank you.
Okay, that's an important question. It's not quite on the topic that we are focused on right now. Who's the second? Go ahead.
I just want to first of all, I'd like to first of all commend everyone for all their input, particularly the policy paper. I was just reading some of the summary outside. I was really, impressed by the framework I saw there, and listening to some of the videos that were played here. I remember some of the activities that are going on in Nigeria that are affecting women, particularly when it comes to leadership. The women in Nigeria and in Africa in general haven't really been given the opportunity to express themselves when it comes to leadership. And by my experience with the women I've worked with, I've seen how they've contributed when it comes to nation building in general, and also contributing to the economic progress of the country. The few ones who have been appointed or be elected in positions have contributed tremendously. So my question is, given all of this background, with all of the points that were raised in the policy paper and the various contributions, do you have a framework of implementing these ideas, especially in Africa, where these problems are predominant? Because I mean, in the Western world, I'm based in New Jersey, but I see that some of these problems are not really faced by women in the United States and in Europe. So when it comes to Africa, do you have a blueprint or a template or a mechanism that you're working with to ensuring that beyond just putting this down in terms of research, to working with other women organizations and civil society organizations to implementing the rights of women, to ensuring they have a quota in leadership?
Got it.
Africa?
Let me just turn to Queen and Olivia to talk about that just briefly. And I wanted to ask you too, have you taken the paper and your work, particularly the Gambia report, to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and to the whole network of HRC, NH, well, you know what it is. Right, throughout Africa, and what have been the responses?
Okay, thank you. The National Human Rights Commission report on these communities was carried to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and also with our involvement with the Human Rights Council in Geneva during the UPR pre-sessions. I was there and I presented some of the findings of the report together with the report that G4 did to the National Human Rights Councils in Geneva as well. So his question says that how can we implement these recommendations of the findings of the example, the National Human Rights Commission is through what we are doing right now. So we are here at the United Nations General Assembly at the High Level Political Forum, spreading the message of the findings of the Gambia National Human Rights Commission. And then this is the highest way of spreading the message. And then also the locals in the Gambia are aware of the recommendations. And we also have CEDAW gave recommendations and then endorse these findings, and then make sure urging the Gambian to implement this recommendation. So the Gambian National Human Rights Commission is already working on implementing the findings and the recommendations. Yes, maybe Queen can add.
Well, what did you want to add to that? Okay, we only have, yes.
Bring the online voice into our space.
Thank you. So one person wants to know, and they specify it is a concrete question. Given the strong momentum we have been hearing about today, what do panelists or others in the room see as the pathway to get greater global UN recognition of these communities? So I think the question is, what next? What do you do with this? And the other question is from Nidihi Tehran. How do we balance the need to recognize specific exclusionary experiences of the particular groups within their own historical cultural context with the need to work in a broader strategic coalition under CDW umbrella, which is quite interesting as well. Thank you.
First, can we have maybe a comment or two about the UN? I could do it, but you should do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question about how all of these mechanisms and efforts should be working together is a really difficult one, and is a constant challenge. I mean, I'll say as someone, and Gay, you have so much more time on me in terms of being part of these mechanisms. This is just my third year, but even just learning how the coordination does take place, and how the mechanisms set their priorities, and also the very limited resources that they are working with, all of us being volunteers and having other full-time jobs. So I think that there are some infrastructural challenges that are actually getting worse, I think, as there are global political challenges here as well that are impacting the human rights system within the UN. But I do think, and this is, really a response more from my academic work and also thinking about the sort of reflecting on how what's been successful. There is a lot of hopefulness, I think, for the power of advocacy and civil society and their ability to impact how these UN mechanisms work. And I think that's always been the case. But I know that within the working group, we really do take, we consider civil society organizations really very much like in a position of leadership over how we are going to approach things and how we are going to think about things in our partnerships with states. And so that has been, I think, a very effective way of thinking through this. And I think in this particular context can be a very effective way of proceeding. Now you have sort of the policy brief and you have some of the data here. And so I think that now is a time to think about who is in a good position to sort of like leverage forward movement. But Gay, I do think you owe us a little bit of wisdom because, my newbie reflections are not going to be enough.
I don't know whether it's wisdom or not, but I would say that I'd make 2 points. Number one, just thinking about the committee that I sit on, when, we've had a big delegation of civil society leaders from a country making statements like you made, that has made a real impact. And, when you're sitting in a committee, you've got to, my committee is 18 people. So I've got 17 other people that I've got to make sure come along with me. They walk out of the room after seeing and hearing from the people on the ground with real different views. Now, I realize the difficulty of that. Getting to Geneva and even being there at night is a very expensive thing. But if you think the UN is important here, and that's another long discussion we can have. But to the extent that you think that the UN is important, then you got to show up. It's just, I'm sorry, you just got to show up. I can talk all day to my colleagues and they just sort of, yeah, okay, next person. But they listen when people from the ground come and tell their own stories. And that's when they understand what their role really is there. So, I think that's important. Now, everybody has no money now. The UN has no money now. We've tried to include civil society voices online. It hasn't worked well. And you just lose a lot there. So I think that's important. But I think it also, I've always been of the view that rights are made and rights are implemented on the ground. We in Geneva are just tools. And, for me, I want civil society people to come having moved there, having done their movement on the ground, knowing what they need from me. You come tell me what to put on this piece of paper. I'll put it on the piece of paper and I'll give it back to you, but you have to then run with it and make it real. It remains simply a piece of paper until you make it real at home on the ground. I can't do that for you. So I think that, that's a reality too. It's important that we have all of the appropriate mechanisms, making legal recognition of various struggles, and making the right statements to governments as they come before us. But if you don't also bring it up to your minister of what's it when he or she gets home, you know, did you hear them tell you to do this? And we are here to see that you do this. That is how you get it done. You know, so we are all in a partnership here, and no role is higher than other, except maybe the governments, I must say. But they're partners, and some are more partners than others. And we have to recognize that. And we have to listen to their best practices and use them in our discussions, you know, with people in other countries and whatever. So I think that's really what implementation means. But rights are made on the ground. And frankly, as they said in, you know, the Universal Declaration, rights are born. You know, you just have to get them enforced. So that's, you know, that's what I would say. Yes, let's give the last word, and I think it has to be the last word to G5. Here.
Thank you very much, Agay. One of the things that we're trying to move, and I think that is the question also one has come from one Nidhi Trehan from Austin, Texas. This policy is good, and you rightly said that we need to have it on the ground, and that community, I think we are committed to it, we are doing it. One of the things that has not moved sufficiently is we have started to initiate what is called a group of friends of countries. And I'm really thankful that Canada has come forward, Colombia has come forward, Romania, North Macedonia, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Malawi, and Tonga. Very interestingly, they're coming forward. Now, I'd like to appeal to the minister here. Sorry, I don't want to put you on spot, but I know Timor-Leste, we've been trying earlier. We never had that opportunity, but really thankful that you could come. But is there a possibility that Timor-Leste could also co-lead this with some of the countries who are coming forward so that we can have a possible resolution in the third committee, which can have a greater traction towards some kind of policy or a declaration that can come out, which will give a lot of strength and encouragement to many, because that kind of a recognition has not come. CERD has come already, General Recommendation 39, but I think at the General Assembly, it can only come through the group of friends of countries, and we need a co-lead, and it'll be very courageous, because there is unnecessarily certain denials by some of the countries who feel we are directing at them. We are not directing them, because this is a social issue. This is not also the whole responsibility is not only on the states, and the social issue can come with the states putting that pressure and bringing out these kind of resolutions at the top level, so that the legitimacy for us to continue to struggle for this will be very fruitful. So this is one small request from the and also co-lead by UN Women, and this will be a very powerful gesture for the whole of the community.
Thank you. I think it is the first time that Timor-Leste joined this event, and I think this is a responsibility for every one of us to eliminate all sort of discrimination, including racial discrimination. And from our part, Secretary of State for Equality and Timor-Leste, I think we'll be honored to come forward, but we have to have a strong alliance with other. I think we have to, it's not only Timor-Leste, but we have to look for other alliances, member states, maybe from Czech Republic, maybe from others, other countries, and then let's build first an alliance, then with the support and the guidance also from UN Women and also the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. I think we can move forward for that. Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of you for being here, for being enthusiastic about our mission here today. I want to thank G4 for really being the engine for this movement, for this policy paper, and for this event, along with UN Women. Thank you very much. I want to thank Maria Elena, who has been on my phone every day. Working really hard, I know, along with others of her team. So I think this has been a wonderful effort today, and I'm glad that I was invited to be here, and I will be working with you from here into the future. Thank you.
Jai Bhim. Salve.
Ashe.
Uhuru.
Ashe. Ashe. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can we have a picture?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for following this event. Interpretation services are now ending. Thank you to all the technical crew and interpreting crew.